morning, and welcome to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And welcome to Talk of the Town for this Tuesday, May 19th. I'm Gary Stevens. Thanks to Peg McNichol taking care of the program yesterday. Glad to be back in harness. We'll have a sliver of open line time following the 11 o'clock news. After the 10 o'clock news with Bill Rakoff, we will have the Master Gardener, Jan Musin, join us from De Bruyne Seed in Zeeland with the Yard and Garden Hour. But our first half hour on this third Tuesday of the month, back on the regular schedule, and hopefully back in more ways than one for the district and other districts across the state with a regular schedule, is the Superintendent of Holland Public Schools, Dr. Brian Davis. He joins us via the Zoom connection. Brian, good morning and welcome back to Talk of the Town.
Good morning, Gary. My pleasure as always to be here and share what's happening in our schools.
It is a good conversation that we'll have via the Zoom, and you can join the conversation via the telephone at 395-1450, 395-1450. Brian, first of all, I want to touch base on what will happen 2 weeks from yesterday. On the 1st of June, a special evening at the Herringa Holland Civic Center place. Tell us not only what will happen there, some of the planning and some of the reasoning behind having a commencement for the graduating class of 2020 at Holland High School, even though it's not going to be like a lot of other graduations that have been over the years at Holland High.
Certainly. The impact of COVID-19 has impacted all functions, it seems, of daily life. And not only here in the city of Holland, but across our state, across the country, across the globe for that matter. And schools have been significantly impacted by that, and with the executive orders and our inability to bring students on campus for any instruction. While our buildings are closed, learning is still open, and our remote learning plan continues. But there's a class that we have to take special attention to, and that's our class of 2020. These young men and women have worked incredibly hard over the past 13 plus years to reach this milestone in their life, and to be able to honor and recognize that hard work through a celebration called Commence. Can remember dressed up in our caps and gowns and the opens and the gatherings and the pride of our parents or siblings or extended family members who are there to honor and celebrate. We'll have individuals this year who will be the first graduates of their family. We'll be having individuals that are ready to move on to that next level of life, whether that's college or career. We have several students going into the military. Some that have already begun jobs, and we know that this is a difficult transition. Saturday night, I watched the Class of 2020 special that aired on most of the public television networks, and recognizing that this is a hardship being faced by all of our graduating seniors across the country. So what is it that we can do to not only honor their achievement, but to do it in such a way that is safe, and do it in such a way that can bring as much pomp and circumstance to the night as possible? So we have been working very closely with the Ottawa County Health Department. Dr. Heidel has been instrumental in helping us plan this evening and event to make sure that we're not only following the rules of the executive order, but practicing the best social distancing guidelines possible to keep everyone healthy and safe. Recognizing that as a community, it's everyone's responsibility to continue to bend that curve and the number of individuals impacted by this respiratory virus. The City of Holland has been fantastic, as always, to partner and work with. So I appreciate Keith Van Beek and Matt Van Dyken, who have been working with us on these possible plans. And then also Chris Hart over at the Civic Center has just been fantastic. And there's a couple radio partners, one of which we're talking with today, who will be instrumental in helping us organize that event. And then certainly some of our parents who have been very active planning for some special celebrations to honor our graduates. So as you shared, 2 weeks from last night, we will be at the Holland Civic Center doing what might be described best as a drive-in graduation ceremony. Prior to arriving to the Civic Center, our graduates will have the opportunity to go to the Holland High campus. They will pick up the needed materials for commencement. We'll have many staff there with their cars decorated and signs to celebrate and honor and high-five them from a distance, and to be able to make those personal connections that won't be able to be done in our traditional way. We will have then each graduate basically is able to bring a car of people with them and be able to park in the Civic Center parking lots. We're working on some different ways to share the ceremony more through video format beyond live streaming it if possible. Certainly there's some weather conditions that we have to be mindful of. And we will go through a modified program because it's difficult to do the Pledge of Allegiance or the Star Spangled Banner with people sitting in their cars, and we need to be respectful of our country and our flag that way. But basically what will happen is we'll have the ceremony begin. It will be broadcast live over, we're planning 3 different radio stations. It will be live streamed from our district website so that individuals that aren't able to attend because of limited parking spaces will be able to watch it and hear it. Graduates and their families in their car, we've got some special treats that they're going to be picking up before the event, because when you go to like a drive-in movie theater like that, when you were back in the day, for those of us who did that, you had special treats in your car and snacks, right? To be able to enjoy the evening while they wait. And each graduate will then be dismissed from their cars and rows. They'll proceed up to the entrance of the Civic Center. It is actually set up really well so that there's a platform to walk up, a place where their name will be announced. Everyone will be able to hear the name announced, and it comes to a point or a V overlooking the farmer's market, and you can overlook the entire parking area where each graduate will have their moment to be able to see everyone there ready to celebrate and honor them. They will proceed back to their respective parking cars and stand, and then after every graduate's name has been read, after every graduate honored, then the entire parking lot will be able to do a salute to them as they turn their tassels and enter into that next phase of their life. There's a lot more details involved with that. We're working through many of those. We've got a couple other fun surprises planned for that night as well. But being able to look at the best way that we can still provide a ceremony and honor our graduates in that capacity.
It sounds like it's going to be a fun night. If there is like a big projection, no, we will not be airing any those old dancing soda and fries. Let's all go to the snack bar. No.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And the other thing,
no snack bar.
No snack bar.
Yeah, individuals will have to stay in their car, and that's part of the social distancing requirements that we have to be able to engage in and do under the current executive order. Now, May 28th is a date in which our current stay home, stay safe rules apply. And depending upon what the governor announces on May 28th, we may be able to do some modifications. Again, working very closely with law enforcement who have been working with us, the City of Holland, the Ottawa County Health Department. We're able to do this in this capacity because we've been planning and working through those things in partnership with others. We also recognize, I've been doing a lot of study of the work that the governor is following from the University of Michigan in the epidemiology department, and looking at the dates of which social distancing are being reviewed in basically every 2 weeks based upon the number of new cases reported, not only by region but across the state, and also really assessing the governor's 6 phase-in process, and knowing that education is the last sector to be possibly reopened. We don't know if we're going to reopen this fall yet or not, based upon the work that's being done and the study of this virus. I'm part of a task force with the Michigan Department of Education to be able to study that, and what does the school reopening look like. We're working on contingency plans in Holland. And so we believe, based upon all of that discussion, all of that work, being on Zoom meetings with the governor herself, I have a Zoom meeting after this show with Dr. Rice, the state superintendent, that a traditional graduation ceremony, the likelihood of that happening anytime between now and the fall just isn't a reality. And so what is it that we can do then to best honor our graduates in this capacity? And I'm really excited for the team that's come around this and the support that we've gotten to do this. And I think we'll be able to honor our graduates in a very respectful way. And certainly it'll be one of those most memorable ceremonies in comparison to what some of us may have experienced in the past.
395-1450. If you have a question for Dr. Brian Davis, he'll be happy to answer it at 395-1450. No, we are not going to try to find any of those drive-in speakers for those who don't want to turn on their radios and listen. But, and by the way, we will not have the delay on, so we won't get people confused when we broadcast it at 7 o'clock, not only on WHTC, but also on the Lake Shores 92.7 The Van. I'm going to ask you a serious question, though, Brian, and you touched upon a little bit with the fact of being a part of a group trying to plot how school will resume and what can be done. All right, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Worst case scenario, we're still in the same boat a year from now. Are you even thinking about the fact that we might have to have the entire 2021 academic year virtual because there is not a vaccine, there is not herd immunity at the point? We're making progress, but things can happen. Are you even concerned about a worst case scenario in that regard, that we might have to do this all again next spring as well?
You know, certainly it's in the back of our mind. Our focus right now is our current remote learning plan, getting our seniors the acknowledgement and honor that they deserve. We're starting to work on the summer planning, but there's still so much that we don't know about COVID-19. And I believe that we're going to have to enter the school year this fall in some level of social distancing. And I had a chance to be on a Zoom meeting with superintendents from California, Washington, and Virginia last Thursday. This isn't unique to Michigan, although we feel like it's unique to the city because that's what we're experiencing and seeing right now. And if you don't tune into the news often, because it can be challenging sometimes to always hear that constantly, you sometimes forget this isn't just happening here. It wasn't just our Tulip Time Festival that was canceled recently, and Cinco de Mayo and Fiesta events and all those kinds of things. So it's happening across the globe. And we're studying what districts are doing in other parts of the world who've been able to re-enter school sooner. I don't know what it looks like yet to social distance a kindergarten classroom with 5-year-olds and make sure that they're 6 feet apart. I don't know what it looks like to only be able to have 10 students in a classroom. And what does a split schedule day look like for children? I do know that safety is going to be our number one piece. I do know that we're going to have to follow executive orders that are placed before us. And I also recognize and understand there's a critical relationship between the economy and parents going back to work and schools being in session. Because in addition to us providing an amazing education to the students in the Holland-Zeeland area, we also provide a level of childcare service as well, 8 months out of the year. And so we have to get both of those flywheels turning so that they can work together. The economy is going to turn when education turns and vice versa. And that leads us into the critical situation we have with regard to our state budget and how that's going to significantly impact how we're able to open schools in the fall as well.
The financial aspects of the COVID-19 situation, financial reality, we're looking at billion-dollar deficits that the state has to try to balance by the end of the fiscal year, and some are saying that it might be balanced in part on the backs of students and education. What gut feeling are you getting from not only dealing with the lawmakers yourself, but also some of the Association of Superintendents as well, as to how much of a hit it's going to be on education? Is it too early to start worrying about it, or is it about time we start being concerned about it there, Brian?
It's something that as a community we should all be very, very concerned about, and I would encourage our listeners to find out as much information as they can and be able to share their perspective with our locally elected officials, both at the state level, but also those that represent us in Washington, D.C. Last Friday, they had the May Revenue Estimating Conference, and as you shared, we're talking billions of dollars of deficit, over $1 billion expected this fiscal year, and looking at the potential of over $1 billion next year as well. What that translates to is an economic situation that hasn't been seen since the mid-1940s, when you figure and take into consideration gross domestic product and sales and all of those kind of things. And because we've been on this shelter-in-place piece, The revenues that are supported of our school aid fund, largely through sales tax and gasoline tax and those kinds of things, are very, very low. Not surprising. And so the reality is we're facing probably in the neighborhood of a $700 per pupil proration yet this fiscal year. There's only about a month and a half left in this fiscal year. And to be able to make in Holland the equivalency of about a $2.5 million reduction with only a month and a half left on the payroll is devastating to a Holland Public School District. It'll be devastating to all districts in our local Holland-Zeeland area. It'll be devastating to the districts in the state of Michigan. Would be the largest proration of its kind to schools in school funding history. One of the most sizable ones was back in the mid-2000s when we experienced over a $400 cut. We saw significant changes in the way we had to do school, significant impacts to programming and services, and we were just beginning to recover from that. When you consider a reduction of this magnitude at a time when we're going to be asked to increase levels of safety and precautions and bringing students back to school, unfortunately there's going to be increased costs. And I'm not here to say that I have the magic bullet solution to all of this, but there are some pieces in which I think things can be considered. First of all, we need to call upon our federal government, our members who represent us in Congress, and we need to look at additional resources and support to support our schools. That happened during the ARA days. We've received some money through the CARES Act, but additional funds are going to be needed to support all of our schools here in Michigan. We also need to call upon our locally elected officials to be able to look at the stabilization and rainy day fund they have in Lansing. It's a little over $1 billion, and to be very prudent and wise in how they're going to exercise use of those funds to be able to support schools. Schools will go into deficit, some schools will go into bankruptcy and be unable to provide services long term. Over the next 2 years, in looking at state and federal funds, we're looking at a potential 20% plus reduction in our overall funding. Any home, any business, any restaurant, any nonprofit, any small business who experiences a 25% reduction, it's going to be very difficult for them to keep their doors open and maintain services. And I know that's happening to a lot of businesses across our community. We look at the number of layoffs that have occurred within our major companies that support the economy and the economic engine here in our community. We know the restaurants that are barely hanging on. We know everything from the hair salons to dry cleaning. All those pieces, we're all impacted by this. And certainly I feel and acknowledge their pain. But I'm here today to talk about education. I'm here to talk about public education specifically. I'm here to talk about the need to provide education to our kids in a way that's going to contribute to our community moving forward. And it is unsustainable to experience that $700 piece. There's a couple of ways they can do that. We are, the time is clicking and counting down. They have 30 days from the time that Department of Treasury informs the legislatures about this problem. They can either do a proration this year and take that money out and reduce the school aid funding that we're going to get for the next month and a half, or they can reduce our overall foundation grant for the next fiscal year. Either way, the financial hit is the same. There's different mechanics in the way that it's implemented. Either way, there's going to be reductions in programs. As area superintendents, we're already having conversations about how might we do things similarly across the board. And these kind of reductions aren't talking about, oh, let's just reduce the amount of paper and pencil that we purchase. These are large ticket items that are significant impacts. And unfortunately, in education, about 83% of our budget is people. We're a people organization. And so more people are going to be impacted across the board. We need our legislators to look at every possible scenario. We need support from our members of Congress to be able to work in Washington to identify and allocate federal resources to support schools across the country, but more specifically here in Michigan. Absent of those supports, our community in the Holland-Zeeland area across our state we'll see deep, deep, deep cuts in the programs and services for the next school year and the school year following that.
395-1450. Let's see if we have a caller online. Good morning. You're on the line with Dr. Brian Davis.
Good morning. Two issues I'd like to mention. One is the concern about the virus. Last fall, one of the schools had quite a few cases of flu, and they closed that particular school, which was wise. But the rest of the schools didn't close, and now it seems like everything has to close. My boys have some businesses, dealerships. They had an employee that got the virus, was home for a time, recovered, stayed home for another couple of weeks, but none of the other employees stayed home, and now he's back to work, and they continued. They're careful, a lot of disinfecting, and practice ways of plastic between customers and the people that serve them. So there is a way to do it. And I think another thing that we should try to do is get our governor to open our side of the state. The east side is much worse than our side, and we could live with it almost in all the areas of doing like my boys are doing in the dealerships. Another thing, I have two books on my lap here. One is a history book, History of Our Country, textbook for schools, written in 1895. And what a book that is. About 400 pages, 700 articles, very, very pointed, the articles, all the way back to our Pilgrim forefathers, and what they believed, what they did, how they worked, and what a lesson, what an example for today. When, as I mentioned once before, calling of what William Jennings Bryan was concerned about 150 years ago, and that was evolution. And he says evolution will make people lose their responsibility, not feel responsible, and also lose their morality. And that's fulfilled today, both in society and the schools. We're having lots of problems in the schools. And I have another book here, The Rewriting of America's History. And one place especially, what I just mentioned, rewriting. The Bible is a history book. It gives the history from Adam to Christ, every person that lived, the genealogy, all the way, those 4,000 years. And it gives in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. That's a fact. And the heavens declare the glory of God. And Paul writes in Romans that the nature shows his power, his wisdom, so they are without excuse. And then we're foolishly just write theories, and more theories. From my oldest grandson, then the world was 16 million years old. Now with the youngest grandson, the textbooks say the world is 5.5 billion years old. Mm-hmm. And just a bunch of lies. We call it guesses, we call it theories, but it's lies. Mm-hmm. And we're teaching our children that. And we're teaching them less responsibility, less morality, because if there's no creation, there's no law. And worst of all, there's no law, there's no guilt. And that's why we have to have the police in schools. Mm-hmm. And no redeemer.
All right. Appreciate the call. Thank you very much, Dr. Brian Davis. With that, we got to button up this edition of WHTC's Talk of the Town. As always, Brian, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Talk to you again next month.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's Brian Davis on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC. CBS News is next on the hour.